No one in that courtroom could have imagined how the day would end. The tension in the air was impossible to ignore. Every glance, every breath, every sound seemed to fade beneath the weight of what was about to unfold. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber, calm, deliberate, yet every word struck like a hammer, building a sense of inevitable collapse. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, and at the very center of it all stood Austin Chumlee Russell, the beloved star of Pawn Stars. A man who had spent over a decade transforming second-hand deals and quirky pawnshop moments into pure entertainment. Fans around the world loved him for his humor, his simplicity, and his authenticity. To them, he wasn't just another reality TV character, he was family. But in that courtroom, none of that mattered. As the judge continued to read the final verdict, a stillness swept across the room. Time seemed to slow. The weight of justice, built from years of mistakes and reckless choices, was coming down like a storm. And then it happened. In front of flashing cameras, in front of stunned reporters, in front of the very people who once cheered his name. Chumlee collapsed, his body drained of strength, his face pale and distant. It wasn't staged. It wasn't dramatic for the show. It was real. A human being crushed beneath the reality of what fame had cost him. In that moment, the world watching from their screens realized one brutal truth. This wasn't just another celebrity scandal. This was something far deeper. This was the fall of a man who had once seemed untouchable. And behind that fall was a story no one saw coming. A story of temptation, of secrets, of a life that fame didn't just build, but quietly destroyed. But the truth was far more painful than anyone realized. Fame had given Chumlee everything he once dreamed of: fortune, recognition, and a life far beyond the walls of a simple pawn shop. But what no one ever tells you is that fame always comes with a price. At first, it felt harmless. Success opened doors. Business opportunities poured in. His face was everywhere: TV screens, magazine covers, social media feeds. He became more than just a reality star. He became a brand. But the higher he climbed, the more disconnected he became from the person he used to be. What started as hobbies, collecting sneakers, vintage arcade machines, limited edition memorabilia, slowly morphed into obsessions. Lavish purchases replaced simple pleasures. The kid from Las Vegas, who once counted every dollar carefully behind the pawn shop counter, was now living like money would never run out. Luxury cars lined his driveway, a mansion filled with trophies of excess. Nights blurred into parties, days blurred into spending, and while the world scrolled through his glamorous social media posts, leaving likes and comments of admiration, nobody saw what was happening behind the screen. Nobody saw the pressure. Nobody saw the loneliness. Behind the image of success was a man quietly unraveling. In rare moments of honesty, Chumlee admitted that the attention had become suffocating. Simple things, like grocery shopping or grabbing coffee, turned into public spectacles. He was no longer living life. He was performing it. And like so many before him, in the unforgiving world of fame, he began looking for escapes in all the wrong places. The fast life caught up with him. Bad decisions blurred into worse habits. And soon, the man fans loved for being real was living a life that felt anything but real. But the world was about to see what happens when private mistakes collide with public downfall. Because while the cameras captured his jokes and smiles, the Las Vegas police were quietly preparing to uncover the truth he could no longer hide. March 2016, the night that shattered everything. Las Vegas police arrived at Chumlee's mansion quietly. But they weren't there as fans. They weren't there for autographs. They came with a search warrant and a long list of suspicions. What they found behind the closed doors of his luxurious home didn't just shock them, it shocked the entire world. Room after room, The evidence painted a brutal picture of a man living on the edge of disaster. Drugs, weapons, pills, paraphernalia. But this wasn't a small mistake. This was a hidden world, spiraling completely out of control. 12 firearms scattered across the house, some unregistered, some loaded and ready. Methamphetamine, marijuana, prescription pills with no prescriptions in sight. It wasn't just excess, it was chaos. And when news of the raid broke, it hit the public like an earthquake. Headlines exploded overnight. Pawn Stars Chumlee under criminal investigation. Weapons, drugs found in shocking home search. The fall of reality TV's funniest star. Fans were devastated. Social media erupted. The same man they had laughed with for over a decade was now a front-page scandal. Some defended him, desperate to believe this was all a misunderstanding. But others couldn't hide their disappointment. The Chumlee I knew would never live like this. One fan posted online, but this wasn't about assumptions anymore. This was about facts, police reports, evidence bags, court documents, and suddenly, the goofy, lovable star of Pawn Stars wasn't just facing public embarrassment. He was facing felony charges, prison time, and a fight for his life. Not on television, but in a courtroom where second chances were anything but guaranteed. Because behind all the jokes and fame, the real story was just beginning. The day of the trial arrived, and with it, the weight of reality no amount of fame could escape. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse long before the doors opened. Some came holding signs of support. Others came out of disbelief, unable to accept that their favorite TV star could be facing prison. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. There were no bright lights, no camera crews calling for retakes. This wasn't the world of Pawn Stars. This was the cold, hard world of justice. And Austin Chumlee Russell sat alone at its center. Gone was the easy smile. Gone was the light-hearted humor. In its place was a man staring down the consequences of every reckless choice he had ever made. The prosecution wasted no time. With cold precision, they unveiled their case, piece by devastating piece. Photos of weapons lined the screens, bags of seized drugs, reports from law enforcement detailing the scene inside his home. Not a collector's paradise, but a dangerous environment of excess and risk. This wasn't an accident, the prosecutor declared firmly. This was a lifestyle he chose, and a lifestyle that put both himself and others in danger. The room fell silent, but Chumlee's defense attorney rose, determined to tell a different story, not a criminal, but of a man lost in the very world that once lifted him up. Austin Russell is not a threat to society, the attorney argued. He is a victim of sudden fame, of isolation, pressure, and a world that blurs the line between reality and entertainment. The judge listened carefully. Both sides painted two completely different versions of the same man. One, reckless and dangerous. The other, broken and misguided. But neither side could change the facts. The weapons were real. The drugs were real. The risks were undeniable. And as expert witnesses testified about the seriousness of the charges, about the dangers of unregistered firearms and substance abuse, the courtroom felt colder with every word. Chumlee sat frozen, not because of the prosecution's words, but because of what he already knew. This wasn't just about avoiding prison. This was about what was left of his life after everything was stripped away. Fame wouldn't save him here. Only truth and redemption could offer him even the faintest chance of surviving what came next. And everyone watching knew. The final verdict was near. And then, in front of the world, Chumlee collapsed. No warning, no words. One moment, he stood frozen in place, his hands shaking slightly at his sides, his eyes distant, lost somewhere between regret and fear. The next moment, his knees gave out from under him, and his body crumpled to the cold, unforgiving floor of the courtroom. Gasps echoed across the silent chamber. Reporters froze mid-sentence. Supporters outside the windows fell silent as words spread instantly. This wasn't television. This wasn't scripted. This was a man breaking, not just from the weight of the verdict, but from the years of pressure, mistakes, and a life spiraling far beyond his control. Court officers rushed forward. Paramedics pushed through the stunned crowd, their movements fast but controlled. The only sound was Chumlee's shallow, uneven breathing, loud enough to fill the space that moments before had been consumed by arguments, evidence, and accusations. Fans watching live on their screens couldn't believe what they were seeing. Social media exploded within seconds. Chumlee collapsed in court. Pawn Star's darkest moment caught on camera. This is heartbreaking. But inside that courtroom, none of the noise mattered. Because here, in this raw, brutal moment, there were no jokes left. No character to hide behind. No cameras to edit out the pain. Just a man lying on the floor, facing the cost of everything he had built and everything he had lost. Some in the room whispered prayers. Others stood frozen, not out of judgment, but shock, sympathy, the realization that even the people who seem larger than life are still painfully human when everything else is stripped away. And as the paramedics worked to stabilize him, lifting him gently from the floor, one thing became clear to everyone in that courtroom, and to everyone watching around the world. This wasn't just the fall of a celebrity. This was the fall of a man who had spent too long running from himself, and now there was nowhere left to run. 3 days after that unforgettable moment in court, the world saw a different Chumlee, not the loud, laughing TV star, not the man surrounded by wealth, cars, and cameras. This was Austin Russell, stripped of fame, stripped of ego, sitting quietly in his living room, looking directly into the lens of a small recording device. His face was tired, his voice was steady, but real. No performance, no character. "I made mistakes," he began. "Big mistakes. Mistakes that could have cost me everything. My freedom, my career, my life." It wasn't the apology of a man desperate for forgiveness. It was the confession of a man who had finally come face to face with himself. For the first time in years, there were no excuses. "Fame made me feel untouchable," he admitted. "But the truth is, I'm just like everyone else. I got lost, I forgot who I was, and I let things get out of control." His words spread faster than any scandal ever had. But something incredible happened. The world, the same world that had once turned on him, began to understand. Fans flooded social media with messages of support. The hashtag #ChumleeComeback trended for days. Even the History Channel, the very network that made him famous, quietly left the door open for his possible return. But this time, things would be different. Chumlee didn't want the spotlight. He wanted redemption. He focused on rebuilding his life, step by step. Counseling sessions, community service, quiet days away from the noise. He invested in small business projects not for fame, but for purpose. He reconnected with friends and family not for appearances, but for healing. And slowly, the world stopped seeing him as just a fallen celebrity. They started seeing him as human. Fame is temporary, mistakes are inevitable, but character is what lasts. Austin Chumlee Russell lost everything he once thought mattered, and in doing so, he found what truly does. Because life isn't about how perfect you look on camera. It's about who you are when no one's watching. We all fall, we all break, but it's how we rise again, how we rebuild, that defines us. Chumlee's story isn't just about scandal. It's about second chances. And maybe it's about all of us. Because in a world obsessed with judging others from behind a screen, maybe what we all need is a little more grace, a little more understanding, and a reminder that no one is beyond redemption. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe everyone deserves a second chance? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to rebuild yourself from the ground up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. And if this video moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We tell stories that matter.